Sagittarius, something strange is coming. Bad luck ends. Abundance is entering your home. Have you been feeling it too? That strange pull in your chest, like something is shifting, quietly but unmistakably. You're not imagining things. And you, Sagittarius, of all signs, are never called by accident. Welcome, beautiful soul, to Zodiac Wisdom. I'm Sophia, psychologist, astrologer, and your guide in this space where intuition meets insight and your spirit finally gets to speak. This channel was created for women like you, brave, curious, and no longer willing to carry what doesn't belong. Women over 40 who have held families, businesses, and broken pieces together for years. And now you're ready to hold space for yourself. If you're Sagittarius or simply someone who feels like your soul is standing at a crossroad, this video might just change the way you see your own timing. We'll dive deep into the strange winds that are stirring right now, the emotional echoes from your past that are returning not to trap you, but to free you. And most importantly, we'll walk together toward a new opening, where you no longer need to prove anything to receive everything you deserve. So stay with me because the most powerful shift is coming in the final chapter. And it won't just stir your thoughts, it might just awaken your destiny. Now, before we begin, like this video if your spirit's already whispering yes. Subscribe if you're ready for weekly wisdom to keep you grounded and inspired. And comment below, what strange signs have been showing up in your life lately? We read everything, and your story might be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. Are you ready, Sagittarius? Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Strange Wind and the End of Old Limits. Sometimes, change doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes as a quiet breeze, one you almost miss because you've grown so used to the weight of holding things together. Sagittarius, you were born to move, to grow, to seek truth beyond the walls others stay behind. But lately, haven't you felt a strange pause? Like the world you've built around you, one that once felt safe or fulfilling, is starting to feel too small? This isn't failure. It's an invitation. I've seen this before in many of the women I've worked with. There's always this moment, subtle, internal, when the wind begins to shift. Take Lisa, a 52-year-old Sag woman who ran a boutique wellness brand in Oregon. Out of nowhere, she began waking up at 3 a.m., restless. The same routine that once grounded her now made her feel stuck. She didn't know why, but she just couldn't force herself into business as usual anymore. That's when she reached out to me. We looked at her transits. Jupiter was squaring her natal moon, and we both knew it wasn't burnout. It was breakthrough knocking. You see, Sagittarius, the strangeness you're feeling isn't a glitch, it's guidance. The universe is clearing space around you, subtly yet powerfully, to remove what no longer supports your expansion. This could look like friendships that feel heavy, routines that feel flat, or even values that you've outgrown. You may start finding it hard to tolerate the same old conversations, obligations, or expectations. This is your higher self saying, "We're not doing that anymore." And I know this process can be confusing. You've always been the one who inspires others, who holds a sense of direction when everyone else is lost. But what happens when you start questioning the road you're on? What happens when your soul whispers, "This isn't it anymore," and the map you've been following starts to blur? That, my love, is the sacred discomfort of evolution. You're not breaking down, you're breaking out. This wind you're feeling is not chaos, it's alignment. The discontent is a sign that you're being gently pulled out of what's expired, so you can reorient toward what's alive. And that's the paradox of the Sagittarius journey. The freer you become, the more precise your truth must be. You're not here to wander aimlessly. You're here to wander purposefully. So if you felt distant from what once made you feel powerful, if you found yourself staring at your life and thinking, "This used to be enough, why isn't it anymore?" If a voice inside has quietly started whispering, "There's more," that's your sign. You're not meant to keep squeezing your soul into spaces that no longer expand with you. Let the wind carry away what has become too small. Let it loosen your grip on things that once defined you but no longer reflect you. This is the start of your recalibration, not a loss, but a return. And trust me, the next chapter isn't built on what you've held on to. It's built on what you've finally become brave enough to let go of. Chapter 2, Clearing Emotional Weight and Facing the Ghost of the Past. Sometimes, the most unexpected part of a spiritual awakening isn't the new beginnings. It's the quiet resurfacing of something or someone from the past, not with fanfare or explanation, but with a subtle emotional pull that you can't quite name. A presence that drifts into your awareness during a calm moment or slips into your dreams uninvited, reminding you of a story you thought had already closed. And if you, Sagittarius, have recently felt like a familiar name or memory has been lingering too long in your chest, without warning, without reason, then I want you to know, with all the certainty I've gained from walking beside souls like yours, that this is not regression or weakness. It's a call to reclaim your power. Because for someone like you, fiercely independent, guided by truth, and constantly moving forward, the hardest part isn't starting over. It's admitting that something once tethered you so deeply that even now, when your life looks different and your mind says you've moved on, your heart still carries a trace of that old imprint, not as love, but as unhealed residue, something that deserves to be fully released, not ignored. I remember working with Michelle, a Sag woman in her early 50s, who had built an extraordinary life after divorce. New business, new city, new dreams, and yet, in the stillness of winter, she started having dreams about the man she had left years ago, dreams that left her uneasy, not because she missed him, but because they stirred emotions she didn't think were still inside her. She came to me not for closure, but for clarity, and as we sat together, we realized the dreams weren't about him at all. They were about the version of herself who had once accepted so little, who had loved without receiving, who had lost pieces of herself in the name of keeping the peace. And that, Sagittarius, is the truth many don't talk about. That sometimes the person you need to forgive isn't just the one who hurt you. It's the version of you who stayed longer than she should have, who silenced her intuition, who gave more than she had, thinking love would be enough. But you're not her anymore, and this moment of emotional return isn't punishment. It's your chance to fully retrieve what you left behind. The energy of the past isn't here to pull you backward. It's simply rising to the surface so you can let it go. Not with resentment, not with rage, but with a quiet, empowered knowing that what once felt like heartbreak has now become wisdom. You don't need their apology, their explanation, or their approval. You need your own permission to be free. Because this isn't about whether they remember you, regret you, or even realize what they lost. This is about you remembering who you are when you're not carrying their shadow anymore. So if someone's energy has been visiting you lately, not through messages, but through memories, not through presence, but through dreams, don't fear it, but don't hold it either. Acknowledge it like a guest who doesn't belong in your home anymore. Seen, respected, but not invited to stay. You are not obligated to keep doors open to people who once left you behind. And the emotional weight you've been carrying in silence, the one that still tugs on your spirit when the world gets quiet, is ready to be released. This is the part of your journey where you no longer ask, "Why did they do that to me?" but instead say, "Why have I kept it this long?" And when you do, something begins to shift, something that feels like breath returning to places within you that forgot how to exhale. That, Sagittarius, is your healing, not wrapped in dramatic closure or final words, but in your own decision to end the story where it needed to end, and to choose, not with bitterness, but with liberation, that you are now your own compass, and the only direction left is forward. Chapter 3, The Return to Self and the Invitation to Step Out of the Comfort Zone. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? When the things that once brought you joy, your habits, your routines, your goals, even your ambitions, suddenly begin to feel like borrowed clothes that no longer fit your spirit. You wake up and realize that somewhere along the way, without a dramatic fall or loud disappointment, you've outgrown the version of yourself you spent so long building. And that, Sagittarius, is not a sign that you've failed. It's a clear signal that you've evolved. For a fire sign like you, evolution doesn't come through force. It arrives through expansion, not in the way the world teaches growth, but in the way your soul demands freedom. You've always been the explorer, the one who needs space to breathe, room to dream, and the permission to change your mind without having to explain yourself. But lately, there's a new kind of restlessness forming. Not the wild urge to run away, but a quieter, deeper dissatisfaction with the familiar. You don't hate your life. You've simply stopped seeing yourself fully reflected in it. And that is the sacred edge where transformation begins. I remember one of my clients, a woman named Sarah in her mid-40s, who had worked her way to a very respectable place in the world. A successful freelance consultant, mother of two, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a circle of friends who admired her strength. But one day, during a regular coaching session, she said, "Sophia, I look around and I can't find myself in this life anymore." It wasn't depression and it wasn't a crisis. It was truth. And truth, when you're brave enough to admit it, is the first step toward liberation. That's what this chapter is about. Not tearing down everything you've built, but pausing long enough to ask, is what I've created still aligned with who I am now? Because, Sagittarius, your soul doesn't fear change. It fears stagnation. You thrive in movement, not chaos, but meaningful motion. And sometimes, that means stepping outside the well-decorated comfort zone you've spent years curating. Not because it's bad, but because you've outgrown it. And I know, taking the next step feels terrifying when you can't see what's on the other side. But listen carefully. Courage is not about knowing where the road leads. It's about trusting that your inner compass has never failed you before, and it's not about to start now. This invitation to leave your comfort zone isn't asking you to abandon security. It's asking you to make space for alignment. You don't have to sell everything and move to Bali, unless your soul is screaming yes to that, of course. Sometimes stepping out looks like saying no to things you've always said yes to. Sometimes it's turning down a project that drains your energy. Sometimes it's choosing silence instead of over-explaining. Sometimes it's signing up for a dance class at 48 just because your body is craving joy. It doesn't need to be dramatic to be powerful. What matters is this: you stop waiting for the moment when everything feels certain, and you start listening to the part of you that simply knows something new wants to be born. You are not indecisive, you are intuitive. You are not irresponsible, you are in realignment. And every cell in your body knows that comfort was never meant to be your destination. It was only ever a resting place between chapters. So if you felt uninspired, if your passions seem duller, if your future looks blurry but your spirit feels itchy, it's not a crisis, it's a call. And it's time to answer, not with a grand plan, but with a small, sacred yes to something different, something more honest, something more alive. Because when you say yes to yourself, not the version others expect, but the version you've quietly become, you open a door the universe has been waiting for you to find. And Sagittarius, you don't need certainty to walk through that door. You just need to trust that you no longer belong where you've been standing. Chapter 4: Worthiness, Miracles, and the Frequency of Expansion. There is a kind of awakening that doesn't come with fireworks or sudden tears, but through the soft, steady unfolding of a truth that's been with you all along. The truth that you, exactly as you are, have always been enough. And Sagittarius, I know that can be the hardest truth to accept, especially for someone like you who has been conditioned to believe that value is something earned, something proven, something built over years of striving, giving, pushing, and persevering. But the miracle you are seeking now is not the kind that rewards effort. It's the kind that responds to presence, to honesty, to the quiet, courageous moment when you no longer run, not from others, not from expectations, but from yourself. You have done so much. You have carried the dreams of others, maintained peace in places that no longer nourished your soul, walked through fire with a smile just to keep things together. And now, after all of that, there is a voice inside you growing louder by the day, not screaming for more but whispering for stillness, for simplicity, for space. And that whisper is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the return of your wild, beautiful self who has grown tired of earning what she's always deserved. Because expansion, Sagittarius, true expansion, begins the moment you stop tying your worth to how much you do, how many people approve, or how flawless your journey appears, and start remembering that your worth was never conditional in the first place. I remember Elena, a Sag woman in her late 40s, who once told me during a session, "I feel like I've done everything I was supposed to do. Raised the kids, built a business, survived the heartbreaks, and yet I still feel like I'm waiting for permission to rest." That sentence stayed with me because it echoed something I've heard in so many forms from women like you. Women who have accomplished, endured, loved, given, and yet still wonder when the peace will arrive, when the softness will feel safe, when it will finally be okay to stop striving and just receive. And what I told Elena is what I'm telling you now. The peace you're seeking won't come from achieving more. It will come when you start believing that nothing more is needed. You don't need to fix anything to be worthy. You don't need to wait until you've healed it all, completed it all, organized it all. The energy of abundance, of joy, of sacred expansion doesn't wait for perfection. It flows through trust. And when you begin to trust yourself again, even in the smallest ways, like sleeping in without guilt, like saying no without explanation, like choosing rest without apology, you begin to shift into a vibration where the universe no longer sees you as someone in survival mode, but as someone in alignment. And it's in that alignment that the miracles begin to show up, not necessarily in grand gestures or magical windfalls, but in the way you start to feel lighter without knowing why, freer without changing your entire life, more yourself without trying so hard. Sagittarius, your soul was never meant to be confined by the systems of reward and punishment that the world built to keep people chasing shadows. Your soul is meant to burn, to explore, to expand not through proving, but through presence. And the more you soften into your enoughness, the more the world begins to respond to your true frequency. Not the masked version, not the performing version, but the one who has nothing left to prove and everything to receive. So if you've been wondering when the shift will happen, if you've been asking whether the universe sees you, the answer is, it's already happening, and yes, it sees you. Every time you choose honesty over hustle, alignment over approval, depth over performance, you move closer to the version of you that is not chasing miracles, but embodying them. This is what worthiness looks like. It looks like trusting your timing, honoring your energy, saying yes to the things that truly call you and no to everything else without guilt, shame, or explanation. And when you live like that, not only do you expand, you invite the universe to expand with you, bringing the right people, opportunities, and blessings into your life not as rewards, but as reflections of your own return. Not because you've done everything right, but because you finally believed you didn't have to. Conclusion, a sacred closing for a soul ready to begin again. So here you are, Sagittarius, still standing, still expanding, still daring to ask the questions most people avoid. Not because you're lost, but because you're no longer willing to settle for a life that only makes sense on the outside. If you've come with me this far, it means something inside you already knew long before this video began, that a shift was approaching. Not one built on chaos, but on clarity. Not one born of pain, but of permission. You've walked through the strange winds of release. You've cleared the dust of emotional history. You've listened deeply to the quiet tremor of your spirit asking for more. And now, whether you fully believe it yet or not, you are standing at the edge of something new. Not because you've changed everything outside, but because you've remembered who you are inside. This is what returning to yourself feels like. Not dramatic, not loud, just profoundly true. And I want you to know, just in case no one else has said it lately, that I see your journey. I honor the layers you've shed. I respect the fire you've carried through long nights and uncertain mornings. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are exactly where you need to be, and the path ahead doesn't require more striving. It simply asks for more truth, more presence, more of you. So let me ask you this. What part of this message stirred something in you? What truth are you finally ready to admit to yourself? What old story are you laying down today? Not to erase the past, but to make room for your future. I would love to hear from you in the comments, not just as a reply, but as a declaration. What chapter are you ready to begin? What version of you are you choosing to honor next? If you felt seen, moved, or even slightly more grounded through this journey, I invite you to subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom and walk with me through the seasons of this sacred self-work. And if you know someone, a sister, a friend, a soul who may be feeling the same invisible pull, send this video their way. You never know when your small gesture becomes the light someone else was searching for. And remember, this journey doesn't end here. In our next video, we'll explore how Sagittarius energy will rise and shift under the influence of Jupiter and the lunar nodes in 2025. A window that holds powerful potential for those ready to break old contracts and create a life guided by meaning, not momentum. So stay close. There's more ahead. We're just getting started. And as always, I'll leave you with this. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You don't need to do more to be seen. You just need to stand as yourself with softness, with fire, with truth. And that, Sagittarius, is more than enough to move mountains.